Okay, I think we'll make a start for those of you who are logged on. We've got 29 of you, which is great. Welcome to our leadership update, release 3. Hopefully you got the slides and the accompanying 2 documents on Friday, the 19th of March. So hopefully you've had a chance to read through those. We hope you've had a good week so far. Thursday already, my goodness me. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm in some kind of time warp at the moment, where it's Monday morning 1 minute and Friday afternoon the next. It's very, very strange at the moment, and yet time is also going so slowly. I can't get my head around time at the moment. It's all very, very weird. Anyway, I hope you're okay. I hope that you've had a really, really good couple of weeks to full reopening. We're here for you as ever to discuss catch-up funding today, but also just to remind you that the chat is here for you to share ideas, to discuss with each other, and to really just sort of support each other if that's what you need. So although we're hosting and we're facilitating, it's as much your meeting as it is ours, okay? So please do use that facility. Unfortunately, you are muted, as you know. If you haven't dialed into one of these leadership updates before, due to numbers on this ClickMeet platform, microphones are muted. So your only way of communicating with us is by typing. So feel free to communicate, but unfortunately, you won't be able to actually speak. So I've got with me today my colleagues Helen Eversett and Kath Powell, who I'm sure you know by now from the School Effectiveness team, and all three of us will be presenting and participating today. Okay, so today's session is primarily focused on catch-up, how to use the funding, and some solid ideas for you to take away. Please note, though, as we go through, that we use the term catch-up because this is the term being widely used, you know, in things that we read, things that we hear. But we understand and agree with colleagues that negative language at this time, such as gaps, lost learning, catching up, are not necessarily helpful to be using. And we're trying to use developmental language terms wherever possible. So terms such as rework, reshape, those sorts of more positive language terms. But when we say catch up, we all have that common understanding at the moment. So hopefully it doesn't sound too negative. Although we're going to show you the presentation, as we've stated before, these sessions about your discussion. Hopefully you saw the slides last week and have had an opportunity to read through them at your leisure. And hopefully it will save a bit of time today. So we won't be laboriously talking through every single slide. We'll sort of gloss over each one and then open up the chat and get going with that. So although today's session will give you lots to think about, we do urge you to go back and look over the previous 2 releases for this one, for this half term, to think about some of the suggestions around catch-up that have already been made. So colleagues, if you haven't tuned into these sessions before, you can find releases 1 and 2 on our website. Actually, I wonder if Helen or Kath, you could find and pop the link into the chat for those 2, might be quite helpful, because over the course of these releases we have touched on catch-up as we've gone through. So it may be that you've just tuned in today for the first time, or you haven't had a chance to look at releases 1 or 2 yet, and yeah, there might be some useful bits and pieces in there for you. It's not meant to give you work to do, it's meant to hopefully support you as you go forward. Okay, so this slide shows you the links all around catch-up and recovery. So for information about the amount of funding allocated to your school, you need to use those 2 links in blue there. Additional funding for summer term has been announced, and this includes funding for the expansion of the National Tutoring Programme, which you may or may not have read bits and pieces about. I think some schools have hooked into this a little bit more strongly than others so far. But those 2 links will take you to the full guidance about amounts of money and so on. Secondary colleagues will have funding to target specific needs, including Year 7 pupils, and also the Oak Academy materials are going to be grown to accommodate further resources for catch-up. So the two links on the previous slide and the two on this slide will take you to all that full information on the National Tutoring Programme. It's really, really important that whatever you choose to use your catch-up funding for, that you can show it's had an impact and that you're using well-researched intervention. That's really strongly recommended, and we'll come on to that in a bit more detail later on. Just to mention the key consideration here, about reviewing and redefining your catch-up after full reopening and building on the successes of the autumn. So many schools that I've been talking to and been into really developed their practice over lockdown last time and indeed the first time, and they're building on that now rather than starting again. Okay. Thank you, Fran, for that comment there. Okay, so with did you want to say something, Helen? Sorry. I heard somebody.
No, that's fine, Amanda. Later on.
Sorry.
It's good to see you, Fran. That's good that you're using it at
I heard a
Sparkle. I'm
little
interesting to
whisper
hear
in
more.
my
It
headset.
was a whisper. Yes.
Okay, so with this in mind, so the Education Endowment Foundation, who you'll all be familiar with, the EEF materials continue to be invaluable. Their tiered approach is a really good place to start when you're planning to use your catch-up funding. One school I visited recently, remotely visited, I hasten to add, had used this model, this tiered approach model, to draw up their catch-up funding plan, and they'd mirrored those three headings, if you like, in their pupil premium planning as well. So the two were really streamlined and aligned together, the pupil premium funding and the catch-up funding, with those 1, 2, and 3 headings that you can see on that slide there. So if you're not sure where to start, I really recommend that you look at those EEF materials and use these headings as your starting point. One school that have kindly agreed to share their use of catch-up with regarding to national tutoring is Haydens in Crediton, and Andy Smith, the head teacher at Haydens, has identified children who will need the funding the most and the areas of school which can support. So, for example, Forest School and the use of Read Write Inc, as you can see from the top 2 bullet points of this slide here. The other thing that the school have used is one-to-one mentors as a major use of their funding, and the details are here. So I'm just going to give you a moment to skim read over those bullet points there that Andy put together for us. Okay, so any questions or comments around that would be really, really good in the chat. And just continuing Andy's work there at Haydens, they've also used Pearson's as a company with a proven track record of success. I'll just give you a moment to read that if you haven't had the time. And just when I was reading through these slides that Andy sent over, I was thinking about Achievement for All. Some of you may have used Achievement for All in the past. It may be that catch-up funding could be used to target particular groups across the school, and using that support through a company such as that. There are loads of ideas on the EEF website, but I just wanted to thank Andy really for sharing that with us, and definitely we look forward to hearing how that goes. So the National Tutoring Programme, as I said in one of the earlier slides, is something definitely to be reading up about. It's not the only way to use your catch-up funding, but if you haven't considered it, it's worth just talking and thinking around that together as senior leaders. So the use of catch-up funding is going to be for various school aspects, isn't it? Some are going to be whole school things that you need to work on. Some might be around groups of pupils, and indeed some might be for individual pupils and specific needs. Everything that you do, all of these need to be evidence-based, successful strategies. Okay, so in reshaping the curriculum, the following considerations need to be taken into account. And I wanted just to highlight to you, obviously you can read the slide for yourselves, but I wanted to highlight to you bullet point 3. So this is really about you as leaders and your subject leaders particularly being really, really clear on what it is the pupils have missed out on exactly. So rather than, oh, well, they didn't get much chance for PE, okay, which bits of PE haven't they had? Okay, and a school I was speaking to recently, again, the same school actually, we're talking about games and saying, actually, the children they've kept fit. They've done lots of tuning in and keeping fit with their families and individually at home. And some of the children at school have done bits and pieces, but because of bubbles and because of hall space and because of not being able to do this, that, or the other, we haven't done games. We haven't done all those bits around games that is important. So I'm using that as an illustration to say, okay, if you know they've missed out on something, what is it? Which bits is it? Which skills have they got to catch up on? So that you can be really specific and asking your subject leaders to do a little bit of a deeper investigation into those things. And also I wanted to draw your attention to this point here about subject-specific CPD, because it's easy to assume, particularly with your new subject leaders, that they're going to know how to do this type of work. You know, this is quite nuanced, detailed subject curriculum leadership work. If they're new to the role of being a subject leader, you know, it's hard enough when you start out for the first time leading a subject when things are normal. But to have to then try and go back and say, hang on a minute, what is it that our pupils have missed, not only in my class, but across the whole school? How do I then map that? How do we then catch up? And if we can't catch up every single piece of knowledge, which skills have they missed out on? And how can we reshape things so that those skills are built up over time going forward? So I think it's really important to think about CPD for your staff and support that they might need. That could be as simple as buddying up teachers. So a more experienced subject leader works alongside a newer subject leader to help them with that. You know, it's quite complex, some of this stuff, and potentially quite daunting. So there's that whole curriculum reshaping that needs to be considered. And I also wanted to just draw your attention to the last point. Have you agreed the basic building blocks? So a lot of schools we've spoken with across the team, actually, they've all kind of said, okay, we've got certain things we know that all children have missed out on. So there are some certain kind of, if you like, non-negotiable things that we're all going to work on as a class. And it may be that you can use your catch-up funding to staff that, to have some extra capacity on your staff. Perhaps it might be using a cover teacher for a couple of afternoons a week while you release teachers to do their curriculum work. So it's about thinking creatively, using that funding to get your curriculum really sorted out and really buttoned up, ready to go over the summer term. So there's that sort of whole school stuff, really. As well as considerations around curriculum, there are going to be pupil needs around wellbeing, pastoral, physical needs. And you may have seen challenges in reintegration back into school. So certainly things that have crossed my mind and things that schools have said to me are around these bullet points here to consider. We sent a document with the PowerPoint today called The First 4 Weeks. It was a PDF document that went alongside this PowerPoint and will be available on the website. I think it is already there, actually. So if you want a little bit more detail around some of these considerations, that's held within that document, okay? But there are going to be issues that affect that seem to affect everybody. There are going to be some groups of pupils. You might have a group of pupils who, for example, are finding coming into school first thing in the morning difficult. And then there'll be individual level concerns around those sorts of wellbeing, pastoral, physical needs. So it's about using your catch-up funding to support that and to really think about which are the things we need to target. Certainly things like the PSHE curriculum, you can do loads of stuff through that with regard to that consideration. Could it be that your PSHE lead needs a bit of release time to map how they're going to meet some of these needs through class PSHE or form PSHE as things go forward? Okay. So continuing thinking around this wellbeing, pastoral, physical needs, you might decide that using your catch-up funding to staff playtimes and play skills could be a priority. Lots of children, I'm hearing, have lost a lot of that sharing, turn-taking, being able to resolve conflict. Those sorts of things have kind of gone by the wayside because they've been at home, or a lot of them have been at home. So do you need some play workers to help support during those periods of time when they're playing together at school? So supporting the building of, maintaining, repairing relationships, that whole relational approach, restorative practice. Lots of you use these approaches in school. Does it need a boost at the moment? And if it does, do you need to release staff for it, or employ some additional support at this time? And could your catch-up funding be used for that? It may be that you're seeing increased mental health issues either emerging, or could it be that you could support some additional Thrive sessions if you're a Thrive school, or emotional literacy support, or any of those other sort of emotional logic, those sorts of things? Could they be supported through school? Could you support, perhaps you might be lucky enough to have a family worker or a homeschool link worker or somebody in a role such as that. Could they perhaps be working more directly with families who are finding attendance difficult at this time, or returning to full-time attendance difficult? Could you fund additional hours for that person as a temporary measure using that catch-up funding? So we've had a little think about curriculum reshape, and we've had a little think about groups of pupils. You're also going to have some pupils with specific needs who need ongoing support at this time, and may need access through that catch-up funding. And it may be that pupils have experienced one or more of the following at this point in time. It's really important to remember that, you know, children don't necessarily stay in a group. We don't want to sort of label children and see the group they're in only. Obviously, they're all individuals. But some of these vulnerabilities, I think, have been heightened at this time. So I've listed some of the things you might see here. Just give you a moment to glance down that list. I'm sure a lot of you relate to this from the children you've seen coming in. And we were having a conversation today, actually, talking really candidly about external support to schools through social care, early help, health professionals, and how stretched those services are at the moment. And what you're seeing in school is individuals and families who need that support, and the resource isn't necessarily always there, or always there in a timely way for you. And we were saying, actually, catch-up funding really needs to be used to skill your staff up, because these issues have been magnified, and we have more of them now, and the services available to families have a limit, as you know, in terms of capacity I'm talking about. And so catch-up funding needs to be used to skill up everybody in school to try and hold this situation while we all try and move forward. And I appreciate that's difficult to hear, because it makes it sound like everything's down to schools again. but there's a tension there where we're going to have individuals returning to school who wouldn't necessarily meet thresholds for external professional support anyway, but still need something at this point in time. And it's really difficult to do that without having that additional capacity in school on the ground. So I think that the catch-up funding can certainly be used to consider how you're going to support that aspect. I've got some ideas here on the slide, things that you may do, some of which I've touched on already.
I can see, Amanda, we've just got in the chat, Cheryl's just asking, could we get a bank of recommended people, play therapists, Lego therapists, forest school practitioners? I'm sure between us we might be able to put some things together and get that sent out in the next week or so. We'll see what we can do for you, Cheryl.
We may be able to. A lot of these places operate out of private companies, but it may be that our learner services advisory teams might have contacts and things that they could pass over to us that we could get out to you. A lot of our special needs teams have got lots of knowledge in that area.
Susie's just said there's a session for early help on mental health next week as well. And Fran, I can see looking for ELSA training.
Yeah.
We will take all the bits from the chat and we'll see what we can do and gather together, and we'll follow through that over the next week or so to everybody that's booked on.
Yeah, and actually, Cheryl, I agree with you. Half the time it's finding the people, you know, it's knowing what you want to do, but finding the people. And then if you have to go through recruitment for those people, that all takes time. I appreciate that, which is why I think it's important if you have staff in those sorts of roles in school, if they are willing and able to do just a few extra hours or an extra afternoon a week or something at this point in time as a temporary thing, then you can use your catch up for that, because lots of you do have staff in those existing roles, and it's about increasing their hours temporarily, essentially, if they're willing and able to do that. But I appreciate it's a challenge. So on that slide, yeah, before I hand over to Kath, I just wanted to give you a chance. There are some links there. I've put the National Tutoring link in again. There's the toolkit from the EEF and their COVID support guide for schools. Both links are really useful. I've also put in our learner services and ethnic minority are basically our MTAS service links in there. Now, our learner services advisory teachers, they will do traded work. So if there is capacity and you want some additional support at this time, you could use your catch-up funding to buy that in. Now, I appreciate that doesn't give you a member of staff once a week, you know, every Tuesday afternoon you get some additional homeschool link worker time or anything like that. But it could be that you need to develop or train your staff on something specific, emotional logic, for example, and you choose to use your catch-up to get that up and running with your staff. So our learner services do offer a lot in relation to that pastoral and wellbeing stuff. Stuff isn't a very technical professional term, I'm sorry. You understand where I'm coming from, hopefully, though. Then I've also put some information about the Nuffield Early Language Intervention, the Nelly programme, which I know lots of you are already signed up for. And that is a national rollout for catch-up. So if you haven't tapped into that, that is to address early speech and language issues. And lastly, yes, the Devon schools list is there on that link. So if you are a Nelly school, you can find other Nelly schools to chat to, maybe to share practice with, maybe to release teachers to buddy up or something like that. I don't know, but I thought it would be useful for you to have those other schools there. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Kath now, who's going to do a bit around secondary. We've got some bits about outdoor learning coming up. And yeah, as I say, please feel free to continue the chat. I'm going to mute myself before I spout more nonsense.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll be as swift as possible. I'm sure we've got a very tired audience this week as we plough on to the end of term. I just wanted to bring PE, sports and outdoor education into this wider catch-up discussion, because there's a couple of things that were released. First of all, on the 16th of March, and I'm sure most of you will have seen, there was an announcement that you can actually carry forward your spend for PE and sports premium into the summer term. But note, it must be spent before the end of the summer term. So although you can carry it into the new financial year, it must be spent before the end of the academic year. So it does mean if you have got some funding that wasn't spent, that you haven't been able to spend because of lockdown, think about creatively how you might be able to use that as part of your catch-up strategy to actually really, drive forward those opportunities for PE and sport. And that might be about buying additional equipment, it might be about play leaders training, it might be about looking at playground markings, additional time. You might be able to create some additional events. And what I will say is, please do use the AFPI, the Association for Physical Education website. There's loads of great ideas on there. If you're a member, you can access more. If you're not, there's still lots of free things there. And they are also nearly every week running free webinars for teachers. They get recorded, and if you are a member, you can then watch it back. If you aren't a member, you can't. But you don't have to be a member to sign up, but they normally only have between 200 and 1,000 places. So follow them on Twitter or just log on and look at that members site. But there's lots of great things there about PE and sport. But please do think about that PE and go back into physical education as part of your provision, and think about things such as games. And a quick reminder, really, grassroots sport starts from the 29th of March. So I know I've got two very excited boys here that rugby and football starts next Wednesday. So please think about those team sports and those opportunities. Over the last year, young people have missed out on these opportunities, both in school and out of school. So how over the summer term, if you've got any of your sport premium left, or you want to use some of your catch up, could you use some of that to allow young people to catch up on those opportunities that they have not had? But also, everybody knows how important that outdoor learning is, and PE and sport for developing those relationships and that communication and all of the interactivity that pupils will not have had over lockdown with a screen. Okay, so just a few things there, but please look at the AFPI website, because there's lots of great things there to help you, and it's great we've got that funding for the summer. And in addition to that, think about your swimming. We know you can't spend your PE money for core swimming, but for up and above. So it might be that as and when the swimming pool's open, you might be able to revisit some of those young people that had their provision for swimming earlier on in their, in year 3 or 4, and you might be able to get some of those back in the pool for some additional swimming as part of their provision during the summer term. I just wanted to focus on secondary school, and I think we've got some of the colleagues in the audience from the secondary sector, and really think about what secondary specific things you might want to think about. The year 7, 8 and 9 have had a really interrupted years, and within that start to think about that catch up in how are you ensuring that pupils are GCSE ready, but also how are you ensuring those young people that arrived below ARE, whether they're in year 7, year 8 or year 9, how are you really thinking about using that funding to really bolster them to ensure that they are able to fully access that Key Stage 3 provision and prepare for that Key Stage 4? Where are the gaps? Really thinking about, how has it affected their readiness for transition into Key Stage 4? And also think about, teachers, again, that release time in secondary. What are the conversations like between primary and secondary, that enhanced conversation about what bits of the curriculum are or are not being covered this year, particularly outside of the core? What bits of the history curriculum have you not been able to cover because of lockdown? What bits of the geography curriculum? And thinking about that, teachers really going back to their provision and their planning for year 7 next September, and maybe having to recover some of that Key Stage 2 curriculum. So really thinking about, again, that time for release or that time for those conversations to really think about that curriculum going forward and that offer and that engagement. And also from a careers perspective, we also know, young people get that opportunity for work experience, and that careers education is expected from year 8 upwards, and you all have a careers strategy. but actually those young people have missed out on those opportunities. They haven't done the work experience, they haven't maybe engaged with the businesses. So again, could you use some of that catch up to reinforce some of those opportunities with businesses during the summer term and going forward, you know, to allow them to have, even if they're virtual opportunities, to work and interact with businesses and universities, etc., as part of their career strategy. So just a couple of things there to think about for secondary. You know, and in addition, I will say primary and secondary really, what does the after school activity programme look like? Can you use either your PE funding at primary or your catch-up funding to buy more people in to provide more after school activities? And this is not about extending the day because we want a longer day. This is about giving back the opportunities to the young people they've missed over the last 12 months. I'm going to hurry on. The next couple of slides just unpack the EF guidance, and it really is just a reminder to go back to that guidance and think about the key aspects and the research that can support your catch-up funding strategy. About great teaching, talks about transition support, particularly transitioning pupils back into school, but also think about, you know, the Southwest. There's a lot of people relocating, and I think over the next couple of terms, we're going to have an influx of people moving out of the cities, coming down to the Southwest to move. So actually, how are you preparing to support those young people as they transition into their life in the Southwest if they've come from somewhere else in the country? Assessment and feedback, and that one-to-one and small group tuition. Okay, and again, I see Fran in the chat had used the National Tutoring Programme, so thanks for that. She'd used Randstad. And again, if anybody else is using the National Tutoring Programme, please place in the chat who you're using and whether you think it's value for money, because some of our colleagues might want to consider that as one of their options. And again, just here, that extended school day and that intervention programme, but being really mindful about, you know, increasing that school time. It's not necessarily increasing the school time because children have missed learning and you're trying to catch up. It's about giving back the opportunities. I heard some great stuff from a school leader this week, and I think he might be in the audience, about how they've used catch-up really innovatively with teachers to deliver breakfast intervention to those young people that are behind in their mathematics and their English, and they've got focus sessions before school in the morning, and they're finding that's a really great time to catch those young people when they're bright and sparky, get them into you know, and get their peers in to have breakfast while they're having that additional intervention based on what they haven't quite grasped the week before, and it's really focused, and that seems, it's early days but seems to be working well. So again, just another way to think about using that funding. I'm going to rattle on and then do a transition to Helen. We also, you know, the after school guidance from the 8th of March, it really talked about, you know, trying to resume your before and after school provision. And I know that's really hard when everybody's really tired. So again, you might use this funding to buy additional people in, as long as it fits within your risk assessment. And I know lots of companies are starting to operate again that normally offer after school sports and provision, as long as they fit within your risk assessment. And please consider that and think about the opportunities those young people have missed out on from those after school provision activities that they haven't had. I'm going to do a smooth transition to Helen, who's going to take over from me at this slide. I know I'm talking quickly.
Brilliant, thanks Kath, great baton passing there. So yes, we just bolded out that point. This is taken straight from the operational guidance, which I'm sure you're really familiar with, that it can be part of the school's catch-up provision, but for the good reasons that Kath has just said, it's about missed opportunities and making sure that children have those opportunities, especially for those vulnerable children who've really missed out. So I'm going to move swiftly onto the next slide. I put two links onto this slide because, well, mostly because I hope you find that they are useful. We know that these schools are already planning for the big day to the 29th of March, and Kath's household, that's going to be on the calendar, isn't it, Kath, in big red pen round it. Excellent. But from the 29th of March, you know, obviously the schools may be able to widen out their school sport provision. So there are a couple of really useful tools. You may already have found these. They're on the very well used Youth School Trust website. But if you haven't got to that website, have a look. It's all free. There's quite a lot of material to get through, but you'll find there's a lot of detailed help in how you can in a way, not just the logistical planning, but how you can scaffold children back towards the learning that they're going to need in order to fill in the gaps in their PE. So there's a lot of skill suggestions, group activities that build up towards larger group things. So, you know, please do have a look at it, and I hope it's useful for you. I've seen a comment from Rebecca. Oh, sorry, Becky. Well, colourful semantics. That sounds really good. Okay, I'm going to move on to a piece of guidance that I was segueing slightly into, and we're thinking about the use of CatchUp or COVID-19 funding. That the wider kind of application of that could be thinking about how we can restore the outdoor learning that children have lost, and how that we might be able to use CatchUp funding for this. Again, you know, we have to be mindful of the fact that it's all got to be evaluated, hasn't it, and has to have impact. However, we also know that lots of you will be, you know, itching to get back into outdoor education. We sent a PDF. This is just a screenshot of a PDF. And there's a note here that we've sent this to you with the release. We can send it again if you would like, or you can access it yourself on the link. It just gives you some really helpful down-to-earth advice about how you can use the environment around you rather than, you know, perhaps the bigger ticket educational visits or residentials that aren't possible at the moment. It's kind of how to create a halfway house. And at this point, it would actually be, it's probably a good point to mention that you may have seen in the chat that Fran from Sparkwell has been adding to all sorts of comments. Thank you, Fran. That's really brilliant. Fran and I have been part of a, I don't know quite what to call it at the moment, but a sort of skeleton group looking at how we can develop outdoor education. So if you're interested in a little more on that in the summer term, and I've got an update from Brendan in the next slide, will you let us know in the chat? Because that's something that we can look at in an update perhaps early next term. But in the meantime, take a look at this guidance, and it should help you with, you know, that really important thing of getting children back into the outdoors, where some of them may well have missed out. The eagle-eyed among you will earn an immediate gold star for the typo in the title there, spotting that, and sorry about the typo. Brendan, it's just gave me very helpfully this brief update so that you've got a picture of where we are with our wonderful outdoor centres. At the moment, we're still waiting for the DfE to make a decision about when school visits can resume. But this is the current LA advice, which has been agreed with Dawn, which I hope is reassuring that we can move forward with outdoor education. Gold stars waiting. Excellent. Well done, Cheryl. You have the gold star. I'll leave you just to read that for a moment. If you've got any questions about that, I think it's just worth knowing that if this constitutes part of a child's normal curriculum, then it's not a visit. Interesting point. And that may well really relate to forest schools, which I know lots of you have already mentioned so far. Forest schools are at the top of the agenda. So if you would like to see a bit more about that next term, that would be brilliant. Let us know. One more to come in the next few slides. Okay. Okay, so just finally, a few things to consider. Make sure you keep up to date with what Maintain Schools must publish online. Don't forget there is an accountability aspect to CatchUp funding. You know, there are creative ways to use it, and it's all about the needs of learners, isn't it? What's going to benefit them. Some of those excellent ways may be the tutoring program. Some of them may be developing outdoor education provision, forest school. They might be developing your PE. There's all of those possibilities, but we do need to be mindful of the fact that we've got to account for the spending, make sure it has impact. We've had a a lot of detail on National Tutoring Programme. Thank you very much, Andy, for giving those details. That's really helpful, and for all the comments in the chat.
Helen, could I just add one more thing?
Please do, Amanda, if there's
If that's
anything
okay. I
can...
don't want to keep people,
Absolutely.
but I just wanted to draw your attention to the key consideration at the bottom there, because throughout these releases, we've talked a lot about, you know, as long as you know the context of your school and the rationale and what is lying behind or underneath all the decisions you're making, that they work for you with your context, your families, that's what you need to hold on to with catch-up funding as well. Because there's so many things you could spend the money on, but what, with the context of your school, what do your families need? That's what you need to hold on to. And I think that's, and then if you can hang on to that, you will be able to show impact, because you will have selected the things that your school needs. So although there are loads of wonderful ideas that we can share with each other, they need to be sifted through that whole kind of, is this right for my school at this point in time? And I think that, hang on to that, because that's been the mantra throughout. When we did remote learning way back in January now, we talked about what remote learning package is right for your school, for your families. And schools varied a lot in what they provided regarding remote learning because of that. And the schools that did it best were the schools that responded to their own context. And it's the same with catch-up funding.
Fran, we've just got in the chat, Fran's asking about the funding. We're not sure about the funding yet for the autumn term, but as and when we know, we will let you know. Obviously, the new lead has been appointed for catch-up, and we were hoping when we first planned a session that we might get some more guidance from him by this point, but we don't yet. So Fran, I think it's a bit of a watch this space. As soon as we know something, we'll let you know. And if it's something that people feel they would like another session for us to unpack with you, when we get that, please let us know. You know, and again, any other topics that you feel you'd like us to unpack, please let us know in supporting you going forward. Are there any more questions?
Yes.
Any more questions?
We've shared a lot of ideas, as Amanda said, you know, quite a wide range, and
we'll get the chat
about
sent out.
selecting what fits with you.
We can get the chat sent out as well, so you can see some of those comments in the chat if that would be useful for people. Please let us know here if you'd like that to be sent out, and we can download that and get that sent.
Oh, and also, just to finish off, here are our contact details again. If you probably don't need them by now, but just in case you do, the team and our email addresses.
Emily, we will find that out for you.
Yes.
Hello. We'll take that one and we'll get back to you on that one, Emily, to see if there's an absolute deadline for cut-off. I know obviously at the moment things are extending all of the time, like the PE funding. So we'll find out a deadline for you that we know at the moment, but that could well be extended.
Yeah. Colleagues, thank you for your time this afternoon. We promised these events would be prompt, so we started promptly, we'll finish promptly. We know how precious your time is at the moment and how exhausted you must all be feeling. So we'll officially end, but we'll keep the chat open for 5 minutes. If you wish to continue chatting and sharing ideas or exchanging contacts, then this is a great forum to do it. But we're not offended if equally you want to leave. So thank you, and we hope we can welcome you again after Easter for the next round of releases. And yeah, happy Friday tomorrow. Have a good evening.